Hello, good day researchers, and welcome to Practical Research 1 with me. This is Ms. Zhang, and before we are going to continue discussing the other half of Chapter 1, I'd like to discuss a little bit on some very helpful videos I have found on YouTube. First, let's talk a little on strengths and weaknesses of qualitative research in order for us to really understand the process of research making. And there are different types of qualitative research, and we will just focus on phenomenological design, since that's our design for Practical Research 1. And let's discuss on it's an 8-minute video of what is research ethics. It's important to understand ethics before we really draft our Chapter 1. And what are easy steps in order to avoid plagiarism? Okay, so without further ado, let's watch these helpful videos together.
Let's begin with the strengths of qualitative design. The advantage of using qualitative method is that they generate rich, detailed data that leave the participants' perspectives intact and provide multiple context for understanding the phenomenon under study.
Okay, so if you've noticed, one of the advantages of qualitative design is that it gives us rich and detailed data, okay, and by giving us the participants' perspectives on the phenomenon we are investigating.
Under study. In this way, qualitative research can be used to vividly demonstrate phenomena or to conduct cross-case comparisons and analysis of individuals or groups. Among the specific strengths of using qualitative methods to study social science research problems is the ability to first obtain a more realistic view of the lived world that cannot be understood or experienced in numerical data and statistical analysis. Second, provide the researcher with the perspective of the participants of the study through immersion in a culture or situation and as a result of direct interaction with them. It also allows the researcher to describe existing phenomena and current situations. It develops flexible ways to perform data collection, subsequent analysis, and interpretation of collected information. It yields results that can be helpful in pioneering new ways of understanding. It also responds to changes that occur while conducting the studies, say for example, extended fieldwork or observation, and offer the flexibility to shift the focus of the research as a result. It provides a holistic view of the phenomena under investigation. It responds to local situations, conditions, and needs of participants. It interacts with the research subjects in their own language and in their own terms. And it creates a descriptive capability based on primary and unstructured data. How about the weaknesses of qualitative design? Actually, it is not very much true that most of the limitations you find in using qualitative research techniques also reflect their inherent strengths. For example, small sample sizes help you investigate research problems in a comprehensive and in-depth manner. However, small sample sizes undermine opportunities to draw useful generalizations from or to make broad policy recommendations based upon the findings. Additionally, as the primary instrument of investigation, qualitative researchers are often embedded in the cultures and experiences of others. However, cultural embeddedness increases the opportunity for bias to enter into the way data is gathered, interpreted, and reported. Some specific limitations associated with using
Earlier, it was mentioned that for qualitative research, we have small sample size as compared to quantitative research, which requires huge sample size. Now, this part would discuss what are the inherent weaknesses of a qualitative research design.
Qualitative methods to study research problems in the social sciences include the following. First, drifting away from the original objectives of the study in response to the changing nature of the context under which the research is conducted, arriving at different conclusions based on the same information depending on the personal characteristics of the researcher. Replication of a study is very difficult. Research using human subjects increases the chance of ethical dilemmas that undermine the overall validity of the study.
So one
And
of the weaknesses is in using a qualitative research design would be when we are using human respondents. We would highly encounter some ethical dilemmas since, of course, we have to bear in mind the safety and the security privacy as well of the information we get from our respondents. So we have to be very careful in doing the interviews with our respondents, such that we are still following ethics in conducting our interviews. So that's why we will talk about research ethics in a bit.
inability to investigate causality between different research phenomena, difficulty in explaining differences in the quality and quantity of information obtained from different respondents, and arriving at different non-consistent conclusions. Data gathering and analysis is often time-consuming and or expensive, and it requires a high level of experience from the researcher to obtain the targeted information from the respondent. It may lack consistency and reliability because the researcher can employ different probing techniques, and the respondent can choose to tell some particular stories and ignore others. And lastly, generation of significant amount of data that cannot be randomized into manageable parts for analysis. That's all for the strengths and
Alright, so we already talked about what are the strengths and weaknesses of a qualitative research. To further understand the nature of practical research 1, which is qualitative in nature, we will now talk about the different types of qualitative research. Okay, so first type is phenomenological research, and I'd like to emphasize this since this is the research method that we will be using, or the research design that we will be employing for practical research 1. So phenomenological research study is a study that attempts to understand people's perceptions, perspectives, and understandings of a particular situation or phenomenon. This research tries to answer, what is it like to experience such and such? Okay. Um, to add, this type of research seeks to find the essence or structure of an experience by explaining how complex meanings are built out of simple units of inner experience. Furthermore, phenomenological research now examines human experiences, or what we call the lived experiences of people, through the descriptions provided by the respondents. Okay, and the goal of this study is to describe the meaning that these experiences hold for each respondent. Some of the areas concerned for these studies are humanness, self-determination, uniqueness, wholeness, and individualism. An example research question for a phenomenological research would be like, what are the common experiences encountered by a person with a spouse who is undergoing rehabilitation? With this given problem, the researcher has to discover 1. The inner feelings. 2. Emotional hardships. 3. Mental disturbances that the respondent is experiencing in such a phenomenon. Okay, so the phenomenon is as interesting as, okay, this is a problem that these participants or these respondents are experiencing. And as a researcher, I'd like to discover and to learn more about their perception, perspectives, understanding, and what does it feel like not to experience such phenomenon. And we have to understand this since, again, for research 1, the focus of our qualitative research is the phenomenological design. Okay, so that we will really understand that, okay, since this is our design, this is how we are going to approach our research. Okay, and this is done so that everyone, all of us, class, will have the same understanding, because of course others already have background on research, and it might have a different different way of approaching research, because in the first place there's a lot of kinds of research in how it's done, right? And then there's a lot of different types of qualitative, there's a different types of quantitative. Okay, so it's important to understand phenomenology so that we would, once we understand this particular research design, we will then execute with the research process accordingly, no, with the design that was used. Okay, so I'll just run through with other types of qualitative research so that you will know that there are a lot of types DI, but for research 1, we are going to focus on phenomenology. It's so fast, no? Wait lang. Alright, so methods in a phenomenological research at a glance. So first, bracketing. This is the process of setting aside personal experiences, biases, the preconceived notions about the research topic. Again, you start fresh of the topic, and if you have biases on that, you can write that down and step it aside, okay, so that you won't be having biases in interpreting your data. And next, intuition. The researcher remains open to the meaning attributed to the phenomena by those who have experienced it. Okay, so of course, for example, you have your research topic is you chose let's say lived experiences of student parents, okay, or students who are at the same time parents, and you have already your preconceived notions as to them, right? You have your own biases as to that. Now, in this part, you remain open to the different meaning that could be attributed, no, by the people who have really experienced that phenomenon. Okay, so it's important that you step aside whatever preconceived notions you have and be open to what these respondents are sharing regarding their experience, because in the first place they have experienced it by themselves. Okay, so you have you as the researcher, again, you be careful that you are not biased. And then next is the analyzing part. This is categorizing and making sense of the essential meanings of the phenomenon. Since you are given already data from your respondents, and then now it's time for you to make sense of these pieces of data that you got from them. And then researchers, in description part, researcher comes to understand and to define the phenomenon. Okay, so another type of qualitative research is a case study. Okay, it's an empirical study that investigates a contemporary phenomenon in depth with its real-life context. So more or less for case study, you're just going to ask what are the questions and then select cases and then collect data in the field, and then you evaluate and analyze the data. Some cases of like some case studies which are case specific, you do not really need to interview your respondents. You can just observe, or you can just read through and collect data via that. So in grounded theory, method involves comparing collected units of data against one another until categories, properties, and hypotheses state relations between these categories and properties. The hypotheses are tentative and suggestive, and they are not tested in the study. Okay, so more or less for grounded theory is you generate a new theory by doing this specific qualitative research. Sorry. And then we have narrative research, more or less it's retelling of a story or the story of the individuals that you interviewed. And there are some types of narrative analysis or narrative research. We have psychological narrative, we have biographical narrative, we have discourse analysis narrative. And for ethnography, this study involves the collection and analysis of data about cultural groups or minorities. And in this type of research, the researcher immerses with the people and becomes a part of their culture. The researcher in ethnography will have to be in the culture of the specific people that they have identified in order for the researcher to get meaningful data out of that. So that's why you have to select an ethnographic project first, and then you will emerge in the culture and ask. An example question for ethnographic study is, what is the demographic profile and migratory adaptations of squatter families in Barangay Kutkut, Angeles City? Okay, from the La Cruz of 1994. So that's an example of a question for ethnographic study or ethnography. And basically that's it for the different types of qualitative research. So we are just going to focus on phenomenology. Okay, and then main question is, what is it like to experience such and such? So our focus is to understand, again, people's perceptions, perspectives, ideas, understandings of a particular situation or particular phenomenon. Our goal is to understand their experience, the collective experience. Now that by this point, we have understood what are the strengths and weaknesses of qualitative research, and we have understood phenomenology, and then there are other types of qualitative research, but we did not really discuss them further, so that dili lang ta malibog. Focus lang ta on understanding phenomenology, since this is the specific research design that we will be using for practical research 1. Now let's talk about ethics this time.
Hi everyone, welcome back to High School Science 101. Today we are covering something that's very, very important, but something that's not really covered in high schools, and that's research ethics. Every single researcher that deals with human participants needs to have a really good understanding of research ethics, otherwise their research won't be approved by the university and they may actually cause harm to the people involved. Since a lot of high schools don't teach you about ethical research, I've created this video which summarizes some of the key points from the National Statement of Ethical Conduct in Human Research 2007, and this is a document that sets the guidelines for research within Australia. When we're conducting research involving humans, we need to remember to refer to them as participants, not as subjects, and we need to have an underlying respect for them as human beings. Respect their welfare, their beliefs, their customs, their privacy, confidentiality, and their cultural sensitivities.
Again, first is you have to respect your respondents, and we do not label them as subjects because these are people in the first place, so we can address them as participants. Or very specifically in our research, in a phenomenology, research, we can address our participants as informants since they are giving us information on a specific phenomenon. Okay, and again, as what it was mentioned earlier, respect their cultural beliefs, respect their confidentiality. Okay, so you have to understand that. Okay, that's part of research ethics, researchers.
A crucial part of the partnership between you as a researcher and your participants is to minimize the amount of potential harm you could cause to them. Harm can be physical, psychological, social, economic, or legal.
Okay, so we have to minimize harm any way possible. Okay, physical, psychological, social, economic, and legal harm. Okay, because our main goal as researchers is to provide security and safety. That our respondents, our participants feel secured in our research process.
Your research involving humans will have a certain level of risk attached to it. For example, it could be a negligible level of risk, which means there's no foreseeable risk and it may just cause some inconvenience to your participants, or it could be a low level of risk, in which case there might be a bit of discomfort. The level of risk really depends on the type of harm that may be caused, the likelihood of that harm, and the severity of the harm. As a researcher, you must do everything possible to minimize the amount of harm to your participants. If you do intend to cause harm, you must also justify why your benefits of your study will outweigh the harm that you're causing. For example, you might be working on a cancer treatment, and the side effects of that treatment will cause a bit of harm, but the potential benefits of finding a cure for cancer may outweigh those side effects. Consent is another really important aspect of ethical research, and it basically involves giving people the capacity to choose whether or not they want to be involved in.
This is very important. Before you do your interviews, you have to ask for consent from the respondents, from your research participants. If they say no, then you do not proceed with the interview. But if they say yes, they want to participate, then go ahead, we can do the interview. Okay, it's important to emphasize that before you conduct interviews with your respondents, you have to tell them that you have a consent to this. I would like to ask for your consent, whether that's a yes or that's a no from your end. Okay, and don't worry, researchers, because we will have a form to wherein we have to let the participants sign that form as part of ethics, so that they are informed of their rights as participants. And that's done so that we are following research ethics and we minimize harm.
This includes potential participants understanding what your research is about and what's required of them. There's a lot of key information that you need to give to potential participants. This includes the contact details of yourself and where complaints should be directed to, how their privacy and confidentiality will be protected, their right to withdraw at any stage, what the sources of funding are for your research, whether there's any payments to be made to participants, how your data will be managed and used, the likelihood of your research being published, and what you think the foreseeable benefits are of your research. Sometimes an opt-out approach is used, where the information is provided to potential participants, but they must actively tell you that they don't want to be involved, otherwise their consent is assumed. An example of this is organ donation. If you live in a country where they have an opt-out approach for organ donation, and you don't want your organs to be harvested to help other people if you pass away, then you need to actively tell them that you don't want that to happen. Otherwise, if you're involved in an accident and your organs can be harvested to help other people, then they will assume that you've provided consent because you haven't actively opted out. Sometimes, due to the nature of the research and if there's a very low risk of harm, the researcher can offer limited disclosure. This means that the participants only receive a very small amount of information about the study because it actually involves some sort of concealment or deception. A key issue to be mindful of is the issue of coercion and the risk of people feeling pressured to be involved in your study. This can be especially important depending on the relationship between the researcher and the people that you're trying to invite into your study. For example, if I'm a teacher and I want to invite my students to participate in my study, they might feel coerced or a sense of pressure to get involved in my study because I am their teacher, and this in itself becomes an issue. How you'll recruit the people to be involved in your study is an important decision, and you might even use more than one strategy in your project. Your method of recruitment should be relevant to your topic and context, and you must be able to justify why you've chosen to include or exclude certain people or groups of people from being involved in your study. You need to also consider whether your recruitment strategy interferes with your consent process. In other words, does your method of recruiting people interfere with their ability to voluntarily participate in your study? Again, this links in with that example that I just gave you of me being a teacher doing research with my students. If I recruit all the students within my classes that I personally teach, that could interfere with their ability to think that this is a voluntary study, and they might feel compelled to have to participate. When you've collected some results, you need to think about how easy it would be for others to identify people or organizations that have been involved in your study. Obviously, the chances of this happening are at their highest when you've used names or photos, but also be cautious of using birth dates, addresses, or regions. This area also concerns who has access to your data and how and where it is stored. Minimizing the amount of information you collect and store about each person, as well as replacing their names with codes or numbers, will help preserve their anonymity. That gives you a very broad overview of the main things you need to be mindful of when you're doing research involving people. Some other things that the standards cover that I haven't really gone into include data management, sharing of your data with other researchers, and communicating your results to your participants and other third parties. The standards also include a whole chapter on biological research, as well as another chapter on ethical considerations that apply to specific groups of people. These specific groups require special ethical considerations, and they include pregnant women, fetuses, children, people in dependent relationships, people who can't give consent due to their medical state, people with a mental impairment or disability, people involved in illegal activities, Indigenous people, and people in other countries. If you intend to do research through a university, I would strongly recommend that you click on the link in the description and read these standards for yourself, or find the relevant standards for your country. Nonetheless, what I've covered in this video are the main things that you need to think about in order to make your research as ethical as possible.
We need to really understand, everything These here stated are basics, no, covering what research ethics is. It's important that because ethics, this would guide us, because it would eventually, give protection not just to us as the researchers, but more so with our respondents, how we handle, our respondents, and give them let them know what are their rights as respondents of the research. Tell them that it's okay if you do not want to continue with the study to withdraw any time, or it's okay if you don't want to participate. That's fine, because we are asking for your consent in the first place. It's important that your respondents are not pressured, okay? Because as what was discussed earlier, if they are sort of pressured to join your research process, there's quite a question in that, okay? And just also to tell everyone that ethics, I'll read a part. This is page 33 of our book, Practical Research 1 book, that ethics in research promotes the pursuit of knowledge, truth, and credibility. So kana knowledge, truth, and credibility. It also fosters values that are essential to collaborative work. Research often involves a great deal of cooperation and coordination among people in different fields. The important values would include trust, accountability, mutual respect, and fairness. Okay? So, di ba kana siya? Trust, accountability, mutual respect, and fairness. Okay? Many of the ethical norms ensure that researchers are held accountable to the public, whatever they are doing for the research process. Yeah. Adherence to ethical principles help build public support for the research they are doing. And some of the ethical codes and policies are honesty, objectivity, integrity, care, openness, respect for intellectual property, confidentiality, responsible publication, responsible mentoring, respect for colleagues, social responsibility, non-discrimination, competence, legality, and human subject protection. And the rights of the research participants, as discussed in consent part, is 1. Highlight voluntary participation. Next is that they have to be informed consent. Okay, risk of harm, confidentiality, and anonymity of these participants. Okay, so I hope you took down notes as well on the different parts, as it was discussed earlier in the video. So again, ang importante ra jud the goal of ethics is to be fair to everyone and to protect all, in such that there's mutual respect and trust, sa tanan, especially in conducting the research, na ay honesty, na objectivity, and then you have integrity in doing your research. Mo na siya importante. Now, part of, since you have to be honest, di ba, natito nga, dapat na intellectual honesty in ana. And then, there comes the issue of plagiarism, copying somebody else's work without giving due credits, and of course, that is a very big no when you talk about research ethics, di ba? Kay ethics man promotes the pursuit of knowledge, truth, and credibility. Asan man ang truth, ana, if you copy someone else's work, Asan naman ang credibility as the researcher? So that's why in this last sort of video, we are going to talk about this one, and let's view it all together. It's just 3 minutes, guys.
Plagiarism is something we hear about often, but do we really know what it means? You might hear the word used by your professor as part of a warning and something you should avoid. But how do you do this? Let's take a look. First, what is plagiarism? Plagiarism occurs when a writer uses someone else's language, ideas, or other original material without acknowledging its source. Whether you intend to or not, you are stealing someone else's ideas. Here's an example. You're writing a paper for your English class and you find a great quote from a book that fits perfectly into your paper.
Yay!
You copy and paste the paragraph into your paper, but you don't give credit to the source. This is plagiarism. To avoid plagiarizing or passing someone else's intellectual property off as your own, be sure to include a citation after the quote. Plagiarism can be either intentional or unintentional, so we need to look at ways to avoid being an information thief. Here are 5 easy steps to help you avoid plagiarism. Number 1. Use original ideas and opinions. Write your own thoughts and explanations regarding your research topic. If you do need to use information from another source, be sure it is relevant. And if you do use it, make sure you cite it. Number 2. Paraphrase. When you're using information from a source, it's a good idea to put it into your own words. However, you still need to cite the source even though you're paraphrasing. Information that is common knowledge, for example, the sky is blue, does not need to be cited. Number 3. Cite your sources. As I've already said, you need to cite information that you get from a source. Whether it is from a book, journal article, blog, or website, you need to cite it. Here's an example of a citation. In the parentheses, you can see that both the publication year and page number are given. There are different ways of doing this depending on the citation style you're using. Sometimes it can be difficult to tell when a citation is needed. When in doubt, cite it. Number 4. Use quotation marks. If you're putting information into your paper that you took directly from a source, be sure to put quotation marks around that information. This tells the reader that you're quoting directly from your source.
Help!
Number 5. Ask for help. If you're just not sure when and how to cite your information, ask for help. There are several options available to you to get help with your citations. If you're on campus, you can visit ACE. ACE is Southeastern's Academic Center for Enrichment. You can also ask a librarian such as myself, and you can even use online tools such as Purdue OWL's website, which offers resources for both MLA and APA. You can also use Zotero. Zotero is a free tool which helps you collect, organize, and cite your sources. You can find more tutorial videos on our YouTube channel or visit us online at library.seu.edu.
Okay, so again, those are necessary steps, no, in avoiding plagiarism. Cite and paraphrase. It's important to paraphrase, and when in doubt, no, cite. Okay, that's really important. All right, so that has covered it. It's very short, no, but we have already discussed naman sa plagiarism when we discussed APA in text and reference citation. So I hope that this video, no, before we are going to write our chapter 1, that it has helped you really understand okay, so this is the research that we will be conducting, and so the direction of the entire semester would be on this, no, anchors on the phenomenological research, that we are going to ask questions such as unsa man ang experience, so that once we are already guided with where we're going with our research, you know, as the researcher, will have the necessary na expectations na okay, so in ana di ay, and as early as now that again mag-interview ta, no, we will not be using survey. Dili ta maghatag og questionnaire nya survey. We will be doing interviews and give, no, to really ask questions that would lead us to explaining unsa experience sa mga tao when it comes to the specific phenomenon. And again, important to have, no, with research ethics on our mind, we are we now have all of us researchers will now have a same ground. Okay, so since we are conducting this research and we have to abide with ethics, that we see to it that there's no risk and harm, or kanang minimal, no, and that our respondents are also protected. No, everybody is protected. No, and then so that's it. Okay, and I think that's all. After this, another video, the video that I'll be posting after this would be about chapter 1, the next the half, no, katong chapter 1 part 3 and chapter 1 part 4. Okay, sige. So, thank you. I hope that you took down important notes so that, because we have covered 4 topics like strengths and weaknesses, types of qualitative research, research ethics, and just some steps in order to avoid plagiarism. I hope that this has helped you, researcher, to really understand, no, and to set your expectations now of where the research making is going. Okay, so I'll see you on our next virtual class, researchers. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll be seeing you everyone's God bless you, researchers. Bye for now.